Hello and a very warm welcome first to our panel. Thank you all so much for joining me and also to everyone who's going to be listening in. This is Samuel Knight's first roundtable event on diversity and inclusion topics. And we're going to be focusing more specifically on women in leadership positions within the renewable energy space. I have a great panel joining me that I will be introducing shortly. I am Alison Lowrie, Strategy Director for EMEA for Samuel Knight. I come from a 15-year career in STEM staffing. I work closely with organizations of all sizes on hiring strategies and initiatives. And Samuel Knight specifically provide workforce solutions globally within the solar, wind, and battery storage sector. As part of these activities, and to understand organizational challenges related to DE&I, Samuel Knight here are looking for innovative ways to help our clients with inclusion targets and goals. And this roundtable today has really been born out of that. I will be introducing everybody shortly, but just to align everyone to today's topic. This roundtable was born out of an interesting statistic I read recently, produced in a report by the International Renewable Energy Agency last year, IRENA. There was one particular stat that I read that has really influenced today's discussion, and it was focused on solar PV sector study. Interestingly, 40% of jobs within the solar PV sector are operated by women, but only 13% occupy senior management positions. 13% felt pretty staggeringly low, especially considering that this is the level in the business where strategic decisions are made and where unique and diverse ideas are presented and really paramount to a company's success. So we're here to talk about this, as well as a few other related topics, with the overarching theme of transferable skills, which is probably going to be my two favorite words of today. So on this note, I'd like to invite Anna, Tuli, and Sophie to introduce yourselves. Thank you again for joining me. And just tell us a little bit more about you and what you're currently doing. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Floor is yours if you'd like to start.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm Anna, Swedish from the beginning, but live in London. I'm a mechanical engineer and a business-minded person since early years. The last 15, 16 years I've spent in the FMCG industry, leading ventures across the world. Before that, I've been in mining and also in the fintech industry. So probably changed myself 4 times into the last time now where I said, I really want to make a big change. And that can only happen in the climate space. We need to put all the hands on deck to make the change happen to reach the 2050 targets. I'm spending my time on a startup called Unibloom, where we try to drive the change and helping make it easy for sustainability teams to finance their operations. I also sitting on the board of Absolicon, which is a solar heat company in Sweden, as a non-executive director.
Thank you for that, Anna. Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself for us, please? Thank you.
Hi, Alison. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. So I'm Sophie Lam. I'm head of solar at Elim Energy. I am in charge of myself and my team delivering Elim's solar portfolio. We purely do PPAs, which are funded in-house, working all across the UK. Previous to working for Elim, I did work for another renewables company. I've been in the renewables space for about 5 years now. And previous to that, I was working in the bus industry. So a little bit of a change post-COVID, but great to be here today. And I'm looking forward to chatting with you all as we progress.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about your background a bit later on. Thank you for that, Sophie. Tuli, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Alison. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Tuuli Vapaavuori-Vartiainen, and I'm the country manager of Eurowind Energy here in Finland. Eurowind Energy is a Danish company. We are located in 16 different countries, and Eurowind Energy here in Finland started 2.5 years ago, and I started to take care of the company here. Previously, I've been working as a lawyer for the past 11 years before starting here at Eurowind Energy.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Again, thank you all. I'm looking forward to some of the discussions today. We've had some good initial chats most recently, and some really good insight into the word that I love to use, transferable skills. So some interesting things that I had been reading lately, and quite frankly, if anybody hasn't read and is interested in looking at women in renewables statistics, especially for solar PV, I would encourage you to read through. It is a 40-page document. It's really lengthy and it's very thorough. So it's the International Renewable Energy Agency report back in 2022. So some of these stats come from there. Current expectations for growth in the renewable energy sector is really quite staggering. So there's an estimated, I think, circa 12 million jobs in the ecosystem currently, and it's expected to grow to nearly 40 million by 2050. So we have a really long journey ahead of us. And I think I feel like it should go without saying, but I think it needs to be said that we need to get organizations, really, all of us need to get creative and flexible with hiring programs. Sadly, however, and what I am seeing firsthand is the appetite to do so is just shockingly small. I've used our own client base as a market sample of this, and we've reviewed the live vacancies that we've had and supported over 2023. And we roughly estimate that between 85 and 90% of the jobs that we supported for our clients expected previous experience within the renewable energy market. And taking it one step further, not only were they expecting previous experience, they also wanted it very specific to what they were doing within a subsector. So if it was a project manager position in solar, they needed to have previous experience in solar. And really, if that's what we're expecting, we're effectively robbing Peter to pay Paul. And we're going to find ourselves in an untenable situation in the future. There was also a Reuters report back in February that suggested that Germany alone, which is Europe's largest solar market, is predicted to lack 5 million workers by 2030. So when I look at this, and I have to preface this by saying I've got a STEM background, but I'm new into the renewables energy sector. But when I look at these numbers, it seems pretty obvious that if we're not going to start getting creative, and we're not talking at the educational level with current workforce that we have, we're going to be in a sticky situation with a lot of assets and plants that are just not able to get off the ground. Some of you, obviously, Sophie Tooley, you're seeing this firsthand in the development stages yourself. I don't know whether or not there's anything that, Sophie, you're seeing within, trying to attract staff within this space. I think really my big question is, can we look at an existing workforce that we already have, especially women in leadership positions that can transition from outside of industry? Tuli, you've done that yourself in Eurowind. I think you were, when we talked earlier, a prime example of this. I know you were working in a decision-making position, leadership position, in your previous.
Yeah, you could say in a decision-making position. I was working as an attorney, and I was dealing plenty with energy, like renewable energy transactions. So there, yeah, in a sense, decision making, and also doing a lot of dispute resolution. So working at courts and yeah.
You had a good experience with Eurowind as well. You came from that background, and you've applied your legal understanding directly into a country manager position for Finland for Eurowind.
Yes, I think it was very kind of easy for me to start with the background I had. First of all, starting a company basically from the beginning. So all the aspects of that, but also with the wind farm transactions I'd been involved with. I was familiarized with the legal requirements of a wind farm, what a wind farm in Finland would require, what kind of permitting it would need to have, also dealing with a lot of agreements and negotiation in general as a lawyer. That helped me a lot in starting negotiating the first land lease agreements, for instance, in order to start our first wind farms in Finland.
Yeah. Sophie, similar for you as well. You mentioned that you'd come from transport, bus depots. You experienced similar where you're coming from outside of industry and moving into
Yeah,
the position. Tell us a little bit more.
yeah. I think depending on the role, I think there's a lot of transferable skills between industry. You know, as we said, you know, I used to work for a bus company, so it's a lot of organization. You know, arguably there's a lot more people management involved in that space, but compared to renewables, again, it's a lot of organization, communication, coordination. So for me, you know, starting from scratch after COVID, going into renewables, I was very fortunate to have work with colleagues who were really open to teach me and, you know, tried to learn as much as I can and not just kind of learn how to do it, but why I'm doing it. And I think that's helped across the board, you know, now working for Elam. Again, across our business, we've got a wide range of colleagues who've come from all different backgrounds and who are now working together to deliver our renewable package, both solar and battery. So I think it's true for renewables that we are an amalgamation of you know, multiple different disciplines and backgrounds coming together to, you know, produce these solar farms, wind farms, battery plants. In the right role, I think hard transferable skills are invaluable.
Yeah, I think hard transferable skills is actually something that I've been looking at more because there's obviously the soft skills and the hard skills that we look at whenever we're bringing anybody into a new role. It's harder, I would say, it's harder to assess somebody's ability to do a job based on soft skills, albeit the success rates, are still there. I think it's just harder to assess where they fit in. But hard transferable skills is a key one for me because reasonably there's only so many places that you're going to be able to pull from within industry. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the construction industry, oil and gas industries, there are other industries where we can be looking to transfer skills across to the renewable space, or climate tech would be probably a great example. Banking markets, in technology, where we could take people from those types of markets and take their hard transferable skills. So there are definitely the options and the capability to move from certain ecosystems. But I think when we're looking at hard transferable skills, do you find that there's challenges? This question is for anybody. Do you find that there's challenges with upskilling? How long is it taking, and is there some industries that are better than others?
I think for solar specifically, to be completely honest, you never stop learning. You know, as we've spoke about in the past, every site is different. Every site has its own quirks and characteristics. Same when you're doing rooftop PV with, you know, buildings have their own quirks and characteristics. And I think in terms of upskilling, you know, the more experience you have, the better it is. But everybody has to start somewhere. You know, I'm
Yeah.
very fortunate to have a network of people that if, you know, we do come across something strange or something I've never come across before, I can call on and say, what do you think? Have you seen this before? Have you got any ideas? So I think upskilling does take time. It does take time to experience all those variations of different sites, but it's also important to have a strong network as well, because you're never going to know everything, and there probably will be somebody else that will be able to help you.
Yeah, I think it's all about the people around you. I would not have taken on this job if I did not know that I have 100 people now more, but then 100 roughly people in Denmark who are really very knowledgeable about the subject and can help me in various ways.
From our previous conversations, it's been quite, I suppose, positive to hear that Eurowind has taken such an adoptive approach to these challenges. And I think you have yourself in your own team, haven't you? If I remember correctly, all of the staff that you've hired in, because you were first on the ground in
Yeah.
Finland, correct?
Yeah, I was first on the ground and didn't have even an office when I started, but then in a few months I was able to hire my first employee, and now we have 12 employees altogether, and yes, none of them have developed a wind farm from from the beginning till the end. We have few people who have worked with renewables before, but not directly in wind development. So yes, they are all rather. So we are all learning together. Let's say.
Do you find that there's any major setbacks because of that?
Uh, Well, I wouldn't say major setbacks. Sometimes we, of course, like probably need to think about stuff a bit longer than someone who has done it before. But also, what I think it's a very good thing because I believe that we might do things a bit differently and maybe in a more simple way, sometimes more smarter way, because we don't have some like old thought of like this is how we've always done, so this is how we have to do it. So I think we might be more creative.
There's so many archaic practices in how we hire and research the market for staffing, and I think being a little bit more clever and created, even at ground level, is important. I think the challenge that we face, Anna, you've mentioned to me in a previous discussion about looking at how we bring people into the ecosystem, from the start. And I think we can, of course, we need to look at that. And I think that would definitely solve some of our problems closer to 2050. But it's not going to solve the immediate ones. Anna, from your perspective, and just looking at I can class it as climate tech, correct? I know I'm still
Yeah.
learning this,
Yeah.
but from your perspective, when it comes to hiring into this ecosystem, are you having challenges with transferable staff?
Now, I would say this is the best opportunity ever because it's so many people that get lost from Google and the big tech firms, and they want to get into really change the world. Change the world. So you can
Yeah.
see how they can use and apply those tech skills into much more meaningful way. So, already now that you see that, worked in fintech as my co-founder, he said like, I want to make a change. I want to do something really kind of that's, transfer into something more impactful. And how can I use my tech skills in this world? And now we see that, regarding upskilling, it took us a few months to understand how I apply, the principles and frameworks from how to calculate return of investments on new kind of renewables and
Six
then help
months.
companies to make that a business case. And that is how you use the calculations and math and technology and machine learning and all that into those kind of new um, changes and transitions in decisions that need to be happen. So these kind of tech people need to come into this space more than ever, and it's demand and for that in the next generation.
Do you feel that your peers are really adopting that, though? I know you are. I think all of you are examples of where you're very willing and eager to look at these transferable skill
Yeah.
sets. But do you think that your market peers are the same?
Uh, I think many are has a requirement if you look at the job description that like you should have the climate experience. But imagine how many has kind of a very deep climate experience. So that's kind of the specifics on pollution or what you need to calculate. It's harder. So if you have that in your job description, you already kind of get 70% lost of the people you really can bring in. So I think there's many that's trying to form something that you can't get and don't accept that it might take a few months to get these people upskilled
Yeah.
quickly to apply the skills they had from other industries.
Okay. It feels to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me that there's about a 3 to 6 month window of
Yeah.
adjustment to being able to feel comfortable in a new industry
Yeah.
sector.
Yeah.
Would you all agree?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's no different to
Yeah.
any job change.
Exactly.
I mean, I've been now been in renewable energy, and I mentioned STEM background. So I was moving from purely tech market, so your programmers and developers of systems, to renewable energies, which is more, your solar engineers and project developers, et cetera. And I feel in the space of 3 months, my ability to understand the way that things kind of move and revolve is I'm already making an impact. And I think I think we need to consider, we're so afraid, or businesses, we is the wrong word because we are not, but businesses are so afraid of hiring from outside of the sector, and then having, a bad rap, such a long ramp up time. They can't, you know, that they're having on the ground issues. I suppose my question then, and I'm not sure if you yourselves can answer this, Sophie or Thule, but one of the things that I am seeing, and I have a client specifically who's in this boat where they would be happy to look at somebody from outside of the renewable space, but the actual experience that they need from a certification perspective, they're going to be alone, so they don't really have like anybody to help them. And when it comes to more like STEM roles and engineering roles, I'm finding that there's a lot more reluctance to bring people in from outside industry. I mean, is there any particular issues as far as safety, for example, that mean that we shouldn't really be necessarily considering that as a main option?
I'm not sure. I mean, safety is always number one priority, especially on site.
Yeah.
I do think, having certifications on paper is great, and is a ticket into the industry. Poor choice of words there, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
I think there is no substitute for experience in certain roles, but equally, I think part of the consideration here is the growth of the solar industry and businesses wanting to keep up with that growth. And it's almost as if sometimes that we are looking for candidates with experience so that we can keep up with the demand, and seeing that candidates without experience are going to require potentially a little bit more training, a little bit more upskilling, and meaning that we are not going to be able to keep up. But actually, the longer term benefits of potentially taking somebody outside of the industry means that there are different perspectives, different experience that we could draw on at a later date. So a short term demand, in terms of not being able to keep up, is actually a longer term benefit. And I think it's trying to understand that. I think it's got to be a bit of balance of both. I think there's certainly some roles within renewables that can take, as we've alluded to, can take from people from outside. But there are certain roles, I think, within the industry that if it's better to have experience, and it's having a balance, like you said, if you've got one person with experience and one person without, it can create a really good partnership. Whereas if you've got that one role, maybe then you're leaning towards the more experience. But it's
Yeah,
having the team, that the combination.
yeah, and so I actually just recently read. I agree. So Sphere Solar, they have taken the bull by the horns, as it were, where they are. I haven't. I'm still learning about it. I've just recently read about it, but they've basically created a training center in various locations across Europe. They've trained something like 600 people from the
Yeah.
ground up. And although I don't know that you necessarily need to do that to that extent, if every organization had a more competent training program where you almost had almost you had a bench of people that could go on site. I appreciate that there's a cost element to this, but even if you're doing this on a very small scale, you're giving people the opportunity to learn, to be on the job, not necessarily responsible for the high voltage battery storage unit themselves all alone, in their first month, but actually giving them the time to learn and shadowing. And if organizations can start to look to factor that into their, their P&Ls, then they're probably going to suffer less in the long term. And I think that this is where we can kind of pull women in renewables back into the fold. I think not necessarily at the leadership level, but just women in the renewable energy space. I think that the appetite for women to get involved in something new is there. We see this a lot, but they just don't even think that they can. I mean, who was it? One of you were mentioning to me that somebody wasn't even going to apply for the job because they did. Was that you, Julie or Anna? That
Yeah, I had a discussion with a relatively young female who'd been doing wind power development for 3 years or a bit more than 3 years, and she said that she'd be interested in looking for like leadership positions or management positions, but she had an idea that she would need to develop a wind farm from scratch to all the way to an operating wind farm before she can do that. And I told her that, listen, it might take 10 years to develop a wind farm from scratch till the operational time, and that's just like a too long time. And I think that if I would ask a guy whether he would wait for 10 years, I doubt it. Sorry to say, but I think that we should take more risks on like going out there, even though we don't need to know everything in order to be good at something.
But I think the problem is that I think, or first we need to take those risks, but the applications aren't even there to take the risks. There was a recent, so there was a utilities company that shared some documentation with me around the application process, and one of the things that they're doing in order to even the playing field, and I loved this, was that 25% of the applicants that were presented to the hiring panel had to be female. And I imagine that they probably really struggled with that, especially if it was a STEM related role, because the reality is it is a small number. I think in technology, for example, it's like something like 18% are females. So it's one thing to be looking at transferable skills, but I think the reality is we're having to do that in administrative jobs because STEM's so little. And I think reasonably, we have a bigger challenge where the ecosystem isn't big enough to actually even look at transferable skills when it relates to STEM. But also when it comes to the administrative jobs, they're still not applying. So I think if we don't have the candidate pool to choose from, and we're not encouraging organizations to start creating processes like this utilities firm did, then we're just not going to be any better off.
Do you think doing that though gives the impression that there are not talented women out there for the industry? I don't necessarily. It's not that I don't agree. I think that this has synergies back to when I used to work in the bus industry, and again, there's very limited female applications for driving roles, etc. And I think that one of the things that we focused on back then was trying to get rid of this perception of the role, being old school, big, dirty machinery. In fact, it wasn't like that. It was, very modern. And I think the same can be said for renewables. I think giving that kind of preference to applications suggests that there aren't women out there, and I think there are. I think it's the perception of the industry that we need to promote and to encourage. Renewables, especially, I think, is amalgamation of a lot of quite old school male dominated industries, construction, electricians, that kind of thing.
Heavy style positions. That's the perception of it.
Yeah, and I don't think that actually it's a whole lot more than that. And talking about applying for these roles, the role that I'm in at the moment, I applied for it because I was encouraged by my previous boss, who has a whole wealth of experience in construction, and he said, you got to do it, got to learn, you got to move on, you got to grow. And that was what encouraged me, to really look out there and say, I've been in this industry for now a couple of years, I can go to the next level. So I think it is also a combination of the perception of the industry and also the network that you have behind you. I know a lady that used to work for Elam, Julia, has now started up a STEM networking group, FLIS, which I'm looking to join again because, STEM isn't necessarily my background. My background is in logistics and management, but I'm keen to learn and I want to learn and I'm trying to get there. So I think looking in the industry and initiatives like this help people understand the industry, but also build up their network to the point where they feel comfortable and confident to do so if they don't already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think mentorship programs that we've talked about before in previous discussions, it needs to be, I think, a step for anybody in a leadership position, where they have the time, looking at either being part of one or starting one where we can start encouraging, those outside of industry to join. I think would be a good initial step. When it comes to women specifically in leadership positions and kind of pulling this back to these transferable skills, what particular roles do you think are easy transitions? I think, Tuli, you're a testament that coming from a legal background, the transition period is reasonable and it makes sense. You've talked about logistics, Sophie. Anna, you've come from such a diverse background. Ben and Jerry's, which I love. That's it's such a great claim to fame. But you've had the fast moving consumer goods background, etc. What other, so logistics is one of them. What other job roles would you say would be fairly easily transferable? Given STEM's going to be more of a challenge, we obviously have
Yeah,
to do with that.
I, yeah, I think driving sales and leadership in sales roles and
Sales.
marketing, because it's a pretty engineer heavy industry we're talking about,
Yeah.
and the engineers. I'm an engineer by background, but you know, the teaching of leadership in engineering is zero. So already at that stage that we need to bring. So what I can see is that the leadership skills that I brought from Unilever and Ben and Jerry's particularly was to build global diverse teams and driving performance of the business. So I think these two things: how do you build teams to execute on the delivers you have to deliver, and that could be applicable on any industry. Of course, the sales process might be a bit different. The product is a bit different, but the execution and the targets that you are going to drive a profitable sales need to be set up of a different set of people that will make this happen. And if you have the leadership skills or coming from the sports where you know how you build a diverse team to make it happen together, I think those are kind of completely intertransferable in between different industries. So the leadership role as such, as leading teams from sales and marketing. So marketing is such an important piece to make this industry easy to understand, because usually they are selling back to Unilever or whatever it could be, and then easily kind of use those words and formulate in a way that make the impact in industries who need to transform into solar energy, for example, understand return of investments and so on.
Yeah. I think most, I mean, when I actually look at the roles that exist within any organization, one of the only ones that I say is more male occupied is STEM. But apart from that, the ability for women to be an equal force, as it
Mm,
were, is there. It's just not happening. And I think it just goes back to the same point. A program manager or a project manager from way outside of industry. Let's pick bank. I'll pick banking and finance because I know.
mm,
I don't believe that a female project manager from a banking background could not, within the 3 to 6 month time period we've discussed, successfully upskill as a project manager for either development or even construction. I've had a lot of, so I put a couple of things out on LinkedIn, and I have had a lot of men come back specifically within industry and kind of say, well, women don't want to do these jobs.
mm,
And if you don't do these jobs where you're an engineer from the ground up, actually on site, you won't understand how to manage the project. We even had a few debates
mm,
over wine with my husband on this,
mm,
who works in this industry. But I would argue, and I maybe even question, if these kinds of people, let's use the project manager from a banking background, were to move into the renewable industry, how is it that within a 6 month period and on-site visits and mentorship and training and shadowing programs, could that person not be upskilled enough to be able to do their job effectively? Of course, there's going to be gaps in that where they haven't seen something happen before. But I feel you could argue that same point for any industry shift,
yeah.
any change.
I think that at least in Finland is relatively a new market in the renewable sector, and therefore, but I don't know if there's just not enough information. People don't really know what it is, like what we are doing. They hear that wind power development, and they don't know. They have no clue what it is, and then maybe this is also in the other markets. Maybe it's also like in the sort of older markets as well, that people don't really know what it is, and then especially females maybe tend to
Mm,
seek for something more secure that they are familiar with. It's more clear and what they do, and then it doesn't even come to your mind that why should I apply for a job
mm,
that I don't really know what it is, like what it's
mm,
about. And actually, developing a wind farm, it's a lot to do with being able to organize stuff and lead a project and tell people what to do, and
Project, yeah,
that's
organization and operations and,
yeah,
and project management seem to play a huge role
yes,
in this industry. I would say probably arguably most, but this is with all of the new developments, that we're seeing globally. You would think that there are so many skills just around getting people to the right places, the logistics of it, that is not being done very well, because it's probably understaffed and people are overworked, and reasonably, even the trialing of it seems to be, there seems to be so little appetite. But as you say, a lot of people just don't really know. And I think one of the know, or then have this imposter syndrome that, oh, I need to come from an engineering
Mm.
background, because that's
yeah,
what
Mm.
someone told me who works in wind. And I think because those applications aren't happening, we're not really pushing the agendas as a female society. And maybe that's where we need to try to encourage people through these programs to actually start clicking apply. Is it really at that ground level? But I think on the senior management space, going back to the whole reason I got a bee in my bonnet, as it were, around this, is we still only have 13% in senior management positions. And the question is this because organizations don't have enough people at management level to be able to move into these senior management positions in an organic way? So I question that. And in fact, there's 30% in solar PV that are women. So that's not
Mm.
too bad a figure.
Mm.
So then my question is, that management to senior management jump, you know, is that a lack of, that there are less jobs in senior management positions? Probably not. There's where the question mark really lies, because reasonably, if you're looking at the management level at 30% and then senior management at 13%, there's something going wrong at the top, where we're still significantly underrepresented in the most fundamental area of a business where decisions are made and diversity is needed. And that's where I can't wrap my head around what the problem is and how we fix it. Bringing more women into the ecosystem is the first step, I think. The management layer is getting better, but what's happening at the tip of the iceberg, really, I guess, is probably a way that you could say it. And I suppose the question goes back to, what are we offering women to be order to be able to sustain those kind of positions? Good childcare support, flexible work,
Mm.
job sharing, training programs. I don't know that enough organizations are contributing to that.
I think it's a cross-industry challenge. And I asked this question myself the last 15 years, not only in the solar industry, why this is not happening. And sometimes I go back to myself and asking, is it us? It's a bit provocative, but like, is it women that sometimes don't want to, that's had other priorities also? In those kind
Yeah,
of, they're like, do you want to go to the top, because it requires a lot, and
that's a
there
good
is
point.
13%. So the question, I'm a bit provocative here, but what I believe is that one thing is that we have to change the culture in companies, that we don't have meetings after 5 or 4, when, like, we are flexible there. We have to change kind of the way we operate overall in terms of the language we use, because if it's more diverse leadership team overall, you feel more comfortable to join that than if it's just one set of people and you come as an outsider. So that's, of course, it is a change that takes time to make. But like, as you said, there's a few things that also I read an article the other week, that there are a gap when we get kids, when men usually take a leap in their career, then we kind of might come in a bit later. So it might catch up later on the leadership teams. But so there's a few things that, like, the fundamental of the culture, the set of the offering, and then it might be, and also you have that statistics, Alison, but like more potentially, there's just a few people in the leadership roles that is needed. And there's sales, there's potential marketing, there's operations. Like, where are they coming underground? So you like that salespeople, are there more men in those positions from the beginning? And why is that? Because we as tends not to like to sell as much as, as men for some reason. So there's a few things there, but I think we can encourage, if we see more women on these positions, we have to be the leaders to say it's not hard. It's as fun as any other job. So come and be part of that decision making and encourage each other to kind of, promote people to apply for positions in that leadership role.
I definitely do think that the culture it makes a big difference. I think what made me easier to accept this job here at Eurowind Energy was that I noticed quite soon that it's not only the female but also the men in the, maybe it's the Danish culture, but could be, but the men, everyone is quite like family centered. So when the work stops, everyone goes home with their families. It's important they talk about it. Also, the men talk about it. They need to take their children to their hobbies and take part in that. So it's not only that the female people go to take care of the children, but also the men do.
That's very advanced, though, I would say. I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
the
I think
Nordic.
we're seeing that shift. I wouldn't say it's like that in the UK as quite
I,
as quite as
I
well.
think that has to happen, Alison. And I think that's where, as you said, truly, when you hear the men as much or even more saying, I'm picking up, or I'm doing this, or I need to do this, then if you're like, good, there's no reason that I couldn't, but then I might stay longer tonight, but all are accepted on the same terms. And that has to be the fundamentals. And I think the Nordics, as I'm Swedish, also seeing that very much across industries.
I think it's
Um,
like interesting to look at the stats on that.
yeah.
Just looking at the representation country by country would be really
Mm,
interesting to see if that's
mm,
actually affecting change.
I
Maybe it's
think
not.
it does go back to what Tuli said as well about culture. You know, sitting here right now, applying for this job was scary at first. I felt like, I was encouraged to do it. Now that I'm in, again, you think, oh my God. But there's such a strong collaborative presence in the team. Our projects team, Neil, who's our projects director, is so kind of encouraging and wants you to learn and will teach you if you ask for help. And, sitting here right now, I'm just thinking about what Tuli and Anna have said about barriers and people feeling like, oh, I'm not sure I could be that senior person, that senior leader. I don't feel at Elam in my position right now there is any barrier to me wanting to progress my career. I think that the wider team, the colleagues I have in sales and marketing and the projects team would be nothing but encouraging. And same for me if as part of our team. If any one of my colleagues or direct reports wanted to progress, yeah, go for it. Do whatever. It's that kind of collaborative teamwork approach. I don't feel like anybody would try and stop anybody getting where they wanted to go if they made that known. But I haven't felt like that in all businesses that I've worked with in the past. So I definitely think it goes back to that culture as well of, encouragement and positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall there needs to be more discussions like this, so that more discussions like this, but also programs put in place to bring people into the ecosystem. You see that at ground level, but Sophie, you said, the other day, yeah, we can do that at ground level. We can do that, post-education internship type positions, but that's not going to solve any problems getting us to the Paris Agreement on time.
No, I mean, again, in my previous role, we did some installations on schools and we were asked to go in and do a careers day. And we had to do an extra couple of sessions because our session was so busy because, I think back, I'm slightly older now, but renewables was never really advertised to me as growing up as a careers thing. It was always your standard doctors, police, all that kind of good stuff. But again, if I think back, I can't ever think of seeing construction. And again, knowing what I know now, I think maybe that would have been a great idea for me, QS or that kind of thing. As it is, I'm perfectly happy with doing what I'm doing. But, given that we've only got, so long to reach these net zero targets, we're too late to educate ourselves out of this. So these transferable skills, whilst it might be right for 2050, encouraging graduates and school leavers now, in the short term, I think we have no choice to look for transferable skills. And when I say no choice, I don't mean that negatively. You know, I do think that's an incredibly positive thing to do, but education is almost second to
Right.
getting people into the industry.
And I think we just need to be agile about it, especially I think large organizations, it's harder, but these are the biggest culprits. There's a number of people I spoke to when I was going out to put this roundtable together. And, there's some concerning conversations with some of the women in leadership positions in these big organizations. And I was asking, so what programs do they have in place for internal mobility for women? And it's on their website. It's right there, that they promote diversity and inclusion. And frankly, there isn't any, not any that they're actually participating in. And I think the larger organizations, and I can't speak for every organization, there are exceptions to the rule, but the larger organizations seem to be fairly slow in their uptick of this. And these are the organizations, running the most gigafactories that are, just in prime position to need to move the quickest. And we're seeing that it's only the smaller organizations that are remaining agile.
I,
And I
I,
think there's going to have to be that genuine shift where there are some, I suppose, risk. I don't know if risks is the right word, but hiring people where there is going to be upskilling that could cause some delays, because the delays will be much bigger when there's a construction site that they can't staff.
I think that's one of the key thing, Alison, because usually in the big organizations, similar what I try to bring in new skill set to my teams in Unilever, that was also hard because you wanted someone now because you had already gap in that team. So you kind of so stressed to hire someone. So it's much easier to hire someone that's already done the job before. So
Right.
that, as we spoke about before, that taking 3 to 6 months to upskill someone, that's the perception of it at least, is that, oh, I can't afford that waiting time because I need someone now. And that's, I think, one of the big problems, that you always lack a bit of kind of, when someone leave, you want someone in that position usually now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're afraid that that will cost, me as a manager to kind of upskill that person. And then I have a lag there of 3 to 6 months to delivery. So I think that's a perception, that you believe that then it's easier to bring someone that's already done it 20 times or 10 times. So I think that's where, how can we make this 6 months faster and believe that the skills that are transferable are so valuable, which I believe that
Yeah.
you can actually gain more value in shorter time. So how can you as a recruiter write back to each of those kind of, the organization you help to say, guys, yeah, this person from finance don't have all exactly the skills that you're looking for now to lead this project, but she has X, Y, and Z that actually bring more value to what you need that you haven't really thought about before.
I also think that the person who has the skills and who's been working in the same job before, it might not always be the fastest
Exactly.
one to go to the job, because maybe that person has some like old ideas on, I want to do it like this, and maybe you want to do it completely in another way, and it could be more slowly to get that person to learn the new trick, the old dog never learns the new tricks sort of
Yeah.
things.
That's
Than
enough.
the person who never did it to adapt to the way you want it to be done.
Yeah. It is definitely a tricky one. I think that there's a lots of opportunity though, and that's what makes me excited. One of the things I've noticed, which is really different with technology to the renewable space, and I mean, this is a really blanket statement, but I just feel that because the renewable energy space has an agenda that everybody is working towards and passionate about, not just the people in renewable energy, but from outside of that, we need this in order to keep our environment stable. So it affects everybody. Coming from a banking market, I would argue that that's really not the case. I'm not sure they would, but reasonably so. Banking markets were heavily competitive. We were always talking about bringing one person, what one bank was doing, what the other bank was doing, trying to, it was very gossipy. Everybody wanted to know what everybody else was doing, and everybody was out to do better than each other. I feel and sense that there's a lot of differences in this space, in sustainability, in renewable energy, where everybody's working towards a common goal. And the more solar farms that we have, and the more wind farms that we have, the better off everyone is as a society. So the concepts of robbing Peter to pay Paul that I was saying at the beginning really aren't the same. You know, we should be looking for opportunities to do that. Sophie, do you disagree?
It depends. No, I think you're right. I think you're right and wrong in the same sentence. If I'm going up against somebody for a tender, I want to win that tender.
Oh,
So I
sure,
think
yeah,
that competitive nature is still there, you
still
know.
there.
But
Yeah,
I also think you're right in the sense of the solar industry in the UK is relatively small. Most people know somebody that, you know, knows somebody else. Um, but in that sense, the working together towards a common goal goes back to what I was talking about before, where I have a network of people where if I come across something that I'm not sure about, or I have a question, I know I can ring and they will help me. They won't try and trip me up.
yeah,
But, you know, it is still competitive when it comes to working. You know, there is that kind of, not prestige, but that, oh, have you seen what we're building? Wow, you know, you're building that. There is that camaraderie as well. But I think there is a healthier level of competition rather than trying to undermine other people.
yeah. I think that's
Um,
a really good way to put
but
it.
yeah.
Well, sure. I know that there's a lot of issues with land acquisition where everybody's probably going to war a little bit as well. But I would agree. You know, I think having uh, that unified approach to the Paris Agreement goal of 2035. I appreciate there's going to be a lot of challenges to hitting those targets, but I think using that and really starting to implore organizations to look for creative ways to start diversifying their talent pool, not just at leadership level, but holistically, is really where we need to be. I think there's a couple of takeaways really for me. I would implore any woman listening to this who was maybe not so sure about whether or not they'd apply for that nut job to click the apply button. Let's start to overwhelm these organizations with the talent that already exists in our greater ecosystem. And to those organizations who are really struggling to hire and really diversify their staff pool, especially at that leadership level, consider a more agile approach to how you're doing that, and really make sure that you're also interviewing people from outside of industry and look at those transferable skills, my two favorite words. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Sophie, Anna, and Tuli. And we will conclude it here. We'll see you all again for the next roundtable in Q4. Take care.